Good morning, my brothers and sisters. Welcome to episode number 99 in the book of Genesis. Today, the title is Laughing with Sarah, which is opposed to laughing at Sarah. We kind of get a choice here. We can laugh with her or laugh at her. And so today we're going to either laugh directionally, and it's going to be our spiritual conclusion. This is from Genesis chapter 21. Finally, Isaac is here. Verse 21, verse 1. The Lord visited Sarah as he had said, and the Lord did to Sarah as he had promised. And Sarah conceived and bore Abraham a son in his old age, at the time of which God had spoken to him. Abraham called the name of his son who was born to him, whom Sarah bore him, Isaac. And Abraham circumcised his son when he was 8 years old, as God had commanded him. Abraham was 100 years old when his son Isaac was born to him. And Sarah said, God has made laughter for me. Everyone who hears will laugh over me. And she said, who would have said to Abraham that Sarah would nurse children? Yet I have borne him a son in his old age. So let's talk two big things today. One, let's just talk about pregnancy and conception and the amazing thing of that is. So pregnancy and conception cannot be understood apart from the visitation of God. Hannah had the same thing in Samuel chapter 2, 1 Samuel chapter 2. Indeed, the Lord visited Hannah, and she conceived and bore 3 sons and 2 daughters, and the boy Samuel grew up in the presence of the Lord. It also reminds me of Adam and Eve's idea in Genesis chapter 4, verse 1. Adam knew Eve his wife, and she conceived and bore Cain, saying, I have gotten a man with the help of the Lord. So here in our passage today, we see that the Lord did to Sarah as he had promised. So children involve the participation of the father and mother. We all understand that. But here we elevate this to their creation to include not just the father and mother, but the presence of God. So only God can make a baby. Only God can make a soul. The Lord is in it from the beginning. Every mother knows this. And have you ever, so let's just think about ourselves. Have you ever beheld the wonder of a child, or maybe were moved to tears? How did this happen? And who is this person? And how did they get into my family? It's this process of awe that we're talking about. It's this process just before the process of being exhausted, which is what parenting is all about as well. But if you've ever beheld the wonder of childbirth or the start of a new birth, you're on the right track. Doctors say, who are involved in this every day, OBGYN people, this part never gets old. So if you're experiencing this and embracing, that's the visitation of the Lord. So the miracle of childbirth is this very unique awareness that God's presence is in this process. All right, second point here today is about laughter. It's Isaac's name means he laughs. Back in Genesis chapter 17, verse 19, God said, no, but Sarah, your wife, shall bear you a son, and you shall call his name Isaac. I will establish my covenant with him as an everlasting covenant for his offspring after him. So this means he laughs. So it says in our passage today here that Abraham named Isaac, but that's not true. It's really God that names him. And God wanted this kid to be named Isaac. Why is that? To remind them every time you call the kid to dinner about this laughter, this choice of laughter that we get. So on one hand, this is a ridiculous story. Here's the ridiculous part, that God would come down to a family, that God would fire up the reproductive systems of a couple of old people, past their sexual prime, past the bloom of youth, where the way of women had ceased. And they're knuckleheads. They're not perfectly righteous. So when this proposal was made by God, they laughed at God in a bad way. So let's not forget that they kind of didn't believe it. So and when we hear this story, we kind of don't believe it either. We all say, God, you can't really be doing this, entering into mankind's trouble. Why are you bothering? Why did you bother turning towards Adam and Eve after they sinned when you were walking in the cool of the day? Why didn't you just keep on walking? Why did you remember Noah? Why weren't you paying attention to all these acts of unrighteousness and faithlessness that humans have already done to you? On one hand, we say, God will never do this, or he should never do this. There's no way that God will come down. If I was God, I would never do this. This willingness of God is ridiculous. So on one hand, we kind of laugh at God, say, no way. But a second way we can look at laughter is laughing with God. That is the joy that God has decided to act this way towards mankind. So Sarah's a great example of this. At first, she laughs at God in a bad way, and she gets called out for it, and she, kind of gets shocked and says, "No, I didn't laugh." But Sarah denies it, and God said, "No, you actually did laugh." Then by this time, this is 9 months or 10, maybe 12 months later, we find that Sarah is laughing and laughing with God in a joyful way. And Sarah said, God has made laughter for me. Her joy has been restored. And then here's the part that's interesting. And everyone hears will laugh over me. So everybody gets a choice of what to do with the situation about the chosen people coming down to this sort of knuckleheaded family. So we should be aware of this path that Abraham and Sarah have taken over this 25 years. It's been bumpy. There's been detours. There's been some faith. There's also been some faithlessness. The point is, they're not the heroes of the story. It's the Lord that is the hero of the story. So we are instructed to laugh with Sarah. Sarah got laughter. Hey, have you ever had a baby? Ever seen new parents with a 2-month-old? Sarah's ridiculous with her joy, and we can laugh with Sarah, either laugh at the ridiculous parents, or we can be ridiculous with them and coo with the baby and join her joy, join her laughter. So let's have the laughter with Sarah of having the new baby. Let's make with her the ridiculous and ludicrous and silly and preposterous and absurd laughter. Verse 6 asks the questions. Who would have said Sarah would nurse children? The answer is, nobody. She's too old. Yet I have borne him a son in old age. So it's a laughable story. So let's move away from laughing at her and mocking her in a faithless way, and let's laugh with Sarah in joy. God has come. God cares. We get the choice of laughter today. Those parents are ridiculous, or hey, I'm going to be ridiculous with them. Let's laugh with Sarah today. Thanks for listening.